Today is the second day of Rosh Chodesh Adar Samech Tes. We're on Amen Chaf of Hemshek Tafresh Samech Tes of the Vendor Shab.
Alright, so we saw the Pirush in the Pasik Yahalu Hashem Ki Nizkov Shmoi Lavatoi, and we saw that even Shmoi is Nizkov Lavadoi. We saw Nizkov meaning elevated and moved out. Nizkov can be like from the idea of a high fortress, or something which is high and elevated out of the reach. Moved out Lavadoi. That even the Bechina of Shmoi Nizgav Umarumam Sheba Gam Bechinas Ha'ora Da'ein Seif Yefshel and Yeroim Lekabel. We saw that even Shmoi, which indicates a Ha'ora, as we pointed out that the Shem of Ha'odam is not Etzem Ha'odam, it's only a Ha'ora Legabi Ha'odam. So same Lamaila, when we say Shem Hashem, we mean only a Madrega B'Pchinas Ha'ora Bilvad, and even the aspect of Shem is Nizgov Lavadoi, meaning completely withdrawn and unable to be mashpia to the Nivroim. The Nivroim are not able to be Mekabel Lau. Rak, what are they able to be Mekabel? Hoidoi, Al Eretz for sure. That's the Hemshech of the Pasik. That only Ayin of Hoid Vaziv Shel Shmoi Levat. V'hainu, and we touched Hisavas or Ilamas Umipchinas Malchus. Although I don't know if that's what we touched, but that's where we're holding. that's where we got to. That even Shmoi was too high for direct ashpah into the Nivroim. And therefore only Hoid Vaziv from Shmoi was shy to be the Etzem Mokeh, the Savas or the Elamas. So that's what he now goes on to be Mavaya. V'hainu, the Hisavas or Elamas, who Mepchinas Malchus. We saw that the Indian of Malchus has gotten itself too, by the way, what note is that?
Shmatas. They're shmatas.
Tomatoes?
Shmata. For cleaning floors.
Shmatas for cleaning the floor?
Yeah,
I don't think it should be hung there like that. Doesn't look good. I mean, we have to keep the place both mibafnim or mibachutz. We have to keep it a little bit. We made all the renovations and we try to make it nice and decent and menschish looking. It's enough that we got these guys that it's put down on Mafurish Morgan and Avram, it's state in Perusia Shulchan Aruch, that even though it's mutter to sleep in a base of medrash, not in a base of Knesset, it's mutter to sleep in a base of medrash, but that's your Techidei Limud, he gets tired, he puts his head down, the Magen Avraham, it's of Hachnis Mitosei L'Sham Harizeh also, to bring your bed specially into the base of medrash, Kedei zu schlafen, das ist nicht Zelo Mutter. Here we have the whole ganze pomp and splendor, the ganze doers, inmitten the base of medrash. Many times I've told people, at least put it up when you finish, at least fold it up or something. It's not only we've got in the base of Midrash a bed, we have now Milchutz, Al-Chaloim Milchutz, with the Ibrim B'Shovim. We see that how I said it was Hadiva, but at least one, Gilui one and Nishamis in Gufim.
Sorry.
Anyway, I can see that you've been making an effort to get here. That's good. At least we should have that the Roya Mibachutz has to look at some sort of old pajamas or some sort of old underwear. Chayis was not a dog Mechubit Klau. That we stay in Mibachutz, looking into the library. Well, to me, was that a few old Tzurissen was. Come on, guys, a little bit of decency. How do you call it? A little bit of what you might call, in the army they call it Gaivat Yechida, that you have to be proud of your unit, you have to a little bit of pride in the unit. Anyway, back to our theme. We're jumping from Taktis Asiya into Shoyo Atmi. Taktis Asiya. Al-Khofanim, says the Rebbe, that we saw the two extremities in Malchus. On the one hand, the shoulders of Malchus were tremendously high. However, the Indian of Malchus Papoyel is that the Melech is withdrawn from the people, and that's only a Kvoid Malchus and a Dibur Bilvad, and in the Dibur Gufa only a Chitenius Dibur, which is Nimshach from the Melech ala Medina. He doesn't personally actually force his own personage on the Medina. It's only his name, and as we'll see in a minute, he's covered v'chulu, what they run the Medina. So that's the two extremities in Malchus. On the one hand, Asherish Gavoya Bioter, but yet the actual Pu'ul of Malchus is by way of Helem, Havdola V'Reimemus Miha Am. And so therefore he said, how do we get such a union of Hoid Vaziv, that it should be Shai to his Savas or Ilames? Well, that's through the fact that his Savas comes from the union from Malchus, like it's Mavur. But to get to Bereshis Boro Elokim, that Elokim is the Kalim of Malchus, the Etzim Koyach, Havdolah, the Achimtzum in Malchus, which leads to the Inyan of Boro, the Inyan Abriya Bapoya. Shenikra Acharei Hashem. The Inyan from Malchus is called literally after the Eibishter. In other words, Madrega of what we might call Bechinas Achurai, Bechitanius Levat. Achurayim mean left over, and Chitenius meaning the idea of a surface outward Gilui Levat. Now that Pasuk Acharei Hashem, well, that's in Sefer Dvarim in Pasha Re'eh. It's written over there Acharei Hashem Elokechem Teilechu, and then it's written V'yisei Ta'aved V'shmoi Tishaveya V'chulu. So it's Mavurin considers that Acharei Hashem Elokechem means that you go at the beginning of the Aveda only in the Chitanias, that you can't spring immediately into all the Inyonim, the Pnimias. That first of all you have to go in the levels of Elokus, which are only Acharei Hashem. They're only the Acharayim and the leftovers, the Shiraim, which are Nimshah, but they're Tzimtzum from the Shem Havaya, and that's even from the Pnimi, and in the Pnimi itself, the low level where the mensch can be masik, that there's a Devar Havaya, but take Kol Nivra, because we saw earlier in the Hemshah. Therefore, that's called Acharei Hashem, because it's only a Bechina Chitanius, Legabi Amitius Shema, Havaya Amitius Ayas Spheres, and Lamaila Mihem. Therefore, that has to be the beginning of the Aved. You have to begin by going Acharei Hashem, literally. And then that causes a union from Teilechu, then you reach a Madrega where you go from level to level, and then eventually it can be V'yosei Tavoidu Uboisid Bakun. It's written over there that you should be Dovuk, you can come eventually to Devekis Mamish and Elokus. However, we see that the beginning of the Aved is called Acharei Hashem. Why? Because it's only a level of Achoraim Chitenius Bilvad, which is Nimshach into the Nivroim. And that's what the Nivra can be massing, and therefore his Aveda begins with that level, because it's come down into the Etzem Isavis and the highest of the Nivra Bapoya. So therefore it's called Acharei Hashem, and it's a Inyan from Achoraim Chitenius Legabi Pnimius ad Hashem Havaya. Uksiv, another dogma to that, is what's written by Yecheskel. I know at the beginning of the Sefer where he saw the famous Merkava, Hoel Yoina, he saw the vision of the Merkava, and at the end of all the different Inyonim that he saw a Noiga Misaviv from the Kisei, covered with the whole Arichas, and he sums it up by saying, that all that he saw was Mare Dmus Kvoid Ha-Shem. It was like the vision of a approximation or a similarity to the Kovid of Hashem. That's also referring to Malchus. Shehi b'chinas mare dmus levad. It's only an in of a vision, how do you call it, like a seeing of an illumination or a vision or a mirage, a mare, and dmus is only like we said from the word daime. It's the noun from the word daime, meaning like similarity, bilvat. So we see that there's a double expression there. There's mare dmus, and then there's kvoid Hashem. So we have to say, and as is apparent in the Mefoshim over there, we have to say that the pshat is that the expression kvoid Hashem, even though the word koved can also sometimes mean a ha'ora buvat. It's only the koved of the thing, not the etzem thing itself. However, where the word koved comes together directly with the Shem Havaya, then sometimes we learn it as meaning the koved of the Shem Havaya, meaning the gilui atzmi of the Shem Havaya. And therefore, Chassidus draws a difference in certain pesukim where they talk about koved between, either we say koved means just a ziv bi'alma, or whether koved means the gilui atzmi of the inyan. It depends on the flow of the text. And so in this particular case, I looked it up over there in the Targum, as he teaches, Yekora di Havaya. He writes over there, that's the kvoid of the Shema Vaya, and that means the kvoid Atzmi b'pashtas, and therefore the two words that indicate the union of Chitanius Mare, Chitanius and Achoraim Bilvad are the two words Mare and Demut. So therefore when he quotes the pasuk, he quotes it as Mare Demus Kvoid Hashem. He says that that's referring to the union for Malchus, and he said that Malchus that we're talking about, the Hainu, the Achoraim, but the Chitanius Bilvad, well, that's expressed in the two words Mare de Mus. So therefore he doesn't quote the Kvoid part of it. He says Mare de Mus Levad, because the word Kovid is connected directly to the Shem Havaya, the Kovid of the Shem Havaya. And that's another thing. It's a matter that what is Meya in Malchus is only the Mare de Mus of the Etzem Shem Havaya. Meaning, like we saw, a ha'ora deha, ha'ora. So both of those psukim have in themselves the mila that they indicate a ha'ora deha, ha'ora. Because first of all we say nizkov shmoi, what shmoi itself is a ha'ora. And then we say hoidei, which means a ha'ora of a ha'ora. And the same thing here, we say mare dmus is a ha'ora, and kvoid Hashem is a ha'ora atzmis more. Yeah, but it's also a ha'ora, but it's already in the madrega of the higher ha'ora atzmiyas. And therefore we say that that's ha'ora di ha'ora. So therefore he says, shehi ha'ora, so he says, hainu, what does he do? Brings ha'ora di ha'ora, shehi ha'ora nivdelets. Well, that's already a separated ha'ora. Now this is what we discussed briefly last night, earlier in the text. We made a reference to this. And here it comes up clearly and openly in the Biur. And so there's a difference between different oifane ha'ora, different forms of ha'ora. There's what we call a ha'ora atzmiyas, and then there's a ha'ora which is b'derech tzimtzum, and then there's even a ha'ora which is b'derech tzimtzum v'hester, like we saw here. So a ha'ora atzmiyas is where it's a ha'ora purely from the oya b'li tzimtzum, but it's like a etzem with a ispashtas. That oil itself becomes like a ma'or to a further luminescence of itself, and that's called also a ha'ora da'ora, but not a ha'ora nivdelas. That's called a ha'ora atzmiyas. And a ha'ora of nivdelas is when from the one oil to the other it goes to tzimtzum. So the truth is there are different forms of tzimtzum. Sometimes it can be a tzimtzum miyut bilvad, or it can be a tzimtzum which is hester, mamish, that the tzimtzum hides the whole moya from the oyer, so that the oyer appears to be almost like a separate entity, even though of course it's not. And that's the Indian that we bought yesterday, the dugma of the Cyrus Harosh, what they grow from the brain, and they have a kesher with the brain. They're still miyuchad with the brain, but they're interrupted by a tremendous symptom, which is mailim or mastia on their whole kesher with the brain, and that's the etzem hagu, that's the skull bone, or whatever you like to call it, and they have to be porets, dirt, the skull bone, in order to appear and then they have a tremendous difference between how they are b'shorshim and how they are out on the other side of the etzem hagu goylet. Well, that's one of the famous dugmois of a ha'ora nivdeles. And similar to that, we find in Derek Mitzvah in Mitzvah Mila, over there, and also in the Likutei Torah, in the Lan Natzeach Rashminius, the Alter Rebbe is Masber, or the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek is Masber Barichas, that there's certain halomes in Malchus Tatzilas before the Oyer is Nimshach into Bi'ah, and we call it sometimes Malach Sandal. It's like a malach that is called sandal, or a sandal means like a shoe, they call it like a sandal on the foot. So that's a tremendously thick coverage. Leather is a very thick coverage to cover the foot. However, through that coverage, the foot is able to relate somewhat to the ground. It can walk on the ground and have all sorts of activities. Al Panei Ha'oretz, if it were for the sandal, it wouldn't be able to have klal, which means that there is a certain very limited gilui from the foot goes through the sandal. Which is indicated that if you step on something sharp, then you get yourself nasty treatment. But in other words, that there is a certain yachas nonetheless, albeit that's a very thick and heavy type of hester. But nonetheless, that's what we call a ha'ora niv. Nivdelis, that the ha'ora which comes out on the other side appears to have almost no shaykhs cloud to its moker or its ma'or. And nonetheless, which way it does. It's still miyuchad in the ma'or, but it comes in even that you don't notice that kesher. That kesher is not begodui, and therefore we call it a ha'ora niv. Tell it. Oh, it's not shy to call anything like Gavi Elikus Nivdal. You can't really say anything is Nivdal. When we say ha'ora nivdelis, we mean like Gavi the Mekablim be'ikar. But nothing cholila can become Nivdal from the Eibishter. And therefore we use the expression ha'ora di ha'ora, meaning a ha'ora, which is from a ha'ora, meaning that the original ha'ora itself was a oyer bilvad, but it's become in a oifen, the one that is the ha'ora of the original ha'ora is already a ha'ora nivdelis due to the hester in that type of symptom. And so therefore that's the Indian that the oyer that reaches the nivroim haraya yesh mi'ayin in bi'ah is derech azar symptom by way of hester. That causes it to be not nikah, the connection and the yichud, how they're really betailim b'matziyas in the hierarchy. V'hinenu dehine kesiv ki Hashem alakecha eish oichlo. It's written in the Torah, also in the volume in Pasha Eikev, it's written over there, the ki Hashem alakecha, the Eibishter, your God is eish oichlo. He's a consuming fire. So the ikar diuk is that he's a fire. And in that fire kufa, he's a very consuming fire. Meaning that if you're masik him how he is be'emes, then that eats up your yesh and matziz, you become botel. In other words, that wherever that is musag and begola, then it causes bittul. That's why it's called eish oichlo. Or the ikar nakuda is that elakus legabi, the oilamus is called eish. The koi al oyer atzilus, it's referring to the oyer of elam atzilus beklal. In other words, generally speaking, the level of oyer which is miskale in elam atzilus. The hadavid yeseidas eish ruach maim offer, the four basic elements, they are bedavid elamis. In the ruchnias of those david yeseidas, the shorosh of those David Yisaidas in Ruchnias or in Elakus is in the four oilamas. Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Va'asiyah. Atzilus is Eish, and Bria is Ruach, Yetzira is Mayim, and Asiyah is Offer. So he says Eish, Atzilus, and Ruach, Bria, Chulu. He doesn't go into all the other details because the Ikka is the Indian of Atzilus here. The Atzilus is the Indian for Eish. Why would Atzilus, what is the Kesher, what is Negeya, the Indian of Atzilus to Eish? Okamoisha Eish moved al Mikol HaYeseides. Ve'ena Mishchaba Imohem. Kamoi Kain Atzilus moved al Erech Mibi. In other words, two inyanim here in Eish. One inyan is that Eish is Beklau Muvdal Mikol Shari HaYeseides, and it's not mischaber with them. What does that mean? It's not mischaber with them. That's what you might say, putting it mildly. It's not only that it's not mischaber with them, but it is eish oichla, like we saw. It tends to consume anything that it comes into contact with. We find that later on it does join together with the other three Yeseides to make up matter, and eish is one of the four, so it must be there. So that's brought down that's the mafli la seis, and that is the koyach eloki, what he can hold together all the four Yeseides, and that's one of the Yeseides of Achtes Havaya v'chulu and the ganze Piyur, in the famous Maimon of the Rebbe Marash, the Michal Moicha, where he's marked with that Inyan, brings it down in detail. Well, but that's another result. But if we take the Yeseides, how they are, each one in its own original state, then the Eish is not able in any way to mix with the other Yeseides. It's muvdo mihem b'tachlis, and if it does have anything to do with them, it says only if you'll ask him to be completely, as it were, consumed in me, then I'll have to do with you. And therefore he said that it's muvdo mihem, enemies chaberem. The havdalah is such a havdalah that it can't have any direct contact with them, beklau. So that is indicatory of the inyan von Olam Atzilas. K'moy keinu Atzilas moved out b'erech maybe that there's no erech from the nivroim how they are and bria yitzira v'asiyah to Olam Atzilas. Why they ain't erech? Atzilas hu elakus mamish. Atzilas is mamish elakus ve'ilu bria yitzira v'asiyah anivroim. They're already Yesh miyayin, they're already betachas ha'avdalah from Elikus. That's a tremendous difference, but even so, ein arayim. And not only is it Elikus, but it's nikro elam ha achtus, shehu b'pchinas achtus mamish, b'pchinas atzmus erein sei. That the inyan of Atzilas is botel in such a way in atzmus erein sei that everything there is in a state of Achdus. Okemaima iu v'chayeu chad, iu v'gamoi echad. So it's one of that's the lashon how it occurs in the Tikkunei Zoya, that iu meaning the Eibishter in Pashtus, v'chayeu chayohi his oireis, he and his life force things, meaning his oireis are one. Iu gamohi chad, he and his kalim, as it were, his bones, literally, but obviously in this case meaning the kalim, he and his kalim are one. So how does that indicate to me that Salem ha'achtes, that we say that iu v'chayeu chad, that you can't really separate between the Iyu and Chai. That Iyu and Chai are mamish one thing. In other words, even though there is Chayehi, there is a thing which is nimshach from him, although we say that even after it's nimshach, that it's one with him. Iyu ve, he and that Chad, they're all one. They're all, as it were, one entity. Well, that's immediate in Ha'achtas. And then he says an even greater Chiddush, that he says that even the Kalim are also in a similar type yichud, not the same yichud, because that's why he mentions it in two separate phrases. Not mamish the same yichud, but upon him also describable as chad. And that's why we call it Olam Ha'achdus, because the emerson concept of Achdus, as is going on, is that you have two entities that become one. Then you say Achdus. Where B'Lachatchila you don't have any entity apart from the main entity, then you say Yochid, Yechidus. It's only just one Matthias. Or where you have two things that appear to be two Matthias, and you say that they join up in a botil, one into the other, one into the higher, so then they become a uniform one, which indicates the idea of something, but it's botil, bataklis to the mokir, or to the source point from its ashpur. And that's the same here. That's what he says, that the Esesphiras, how they are, the Eres and the Kalim, in Atzilas, are betelim or rather the Olam Ha'achtus in the union of Atzmus Eirein. Say, in other words, that they're miyuchad with their shoyrish, betachlis hayichud, until they're all one entity, be'efen shel achtus, meaning that there is another entity, but it's so botil and so part of the Matzil, so part of the one who brings it about, that it's describable as one entity. Afila mitzad dekelim iyu v'gamoihi chad. So therefore he goes on now to be masbir, the famous moshe of the kacheles, how it is begilui from, the shalaheves, which is begilui from the kacheles. Okay, the Isa b'Sefi Yetzirah, as is written right at the beginning of the Sefer Yetzirah, but compared to the Esses Spheres of Atzilus, it calls them Esses Spheres Beli Ma. Yeah, that the Esses Spheres have no Mahus, Beli Ma. In other words, they don't have any Metzias of their own. Esses Spheres Beli Ma. Kishelaheves HaKeshura Begacheles. They are like the flame which is tied, literally, or connected to the Gacheles, which means the coal, C-O-A-L, to the ember, as you might say, to the ember, those little chunks that are burning, coals or embers, right? Like the flame that is connected or tied to or bound up to the coal or the ember. Shezeh inen hayichud v'adveikis de'esses spheres da'atilas boirein tzveif hama'a tzil. What that's a way of describing, or that chad that we just mentioned. What in the Tikkun is written very briefly, without any, as it were, taste of a spear. We just say that the oiris and the kelim are bechad mamish, they're ba'achtus gemura with the shoyrish, which is say. This marshal at least gives me a little a more ability, but the marshal to grasp and to have a tziyur here lamata, at least in what sort of a yichud do we mean. So therefore, you take a gacheles, that the fire inside the gacheles is still present. In other words, we're talking that there's a fire inside the gacheles, is if sometimes it can be on its own. Sometimes you need a little blowing, but that itself is also another marshal, but let's forget that for the moment. You need a little sort of a blow, and then a flame will appear on top of the gacheles. It'll sort of, mibachutz, around the gacheles will come out a flame. So that flame is a gilui mibachutz megacheles. It's outside the gacheles, albeit nonetheless it's betachlis kesher vayichur with the fire inside the gacheles. And if there's no fire anymore inside the gacheles, then you won't have the ishpashtas, even though that's an ishpashtas in its own right. It's not the even of the fire how it is inside the gacheles. Of a believe that etzem dika kesher, then you won't have the flame on the outside. So that's what he's now masbir the Rebbe. The betchila u'kamei shalev shikshura ima eish yeshebetoich hagacheles. The betchila hoya shaleves klula betoich hagacheles v'tmunabo. At the beginning, the shaleves was included or entwined inside the gacheles utmuna bo, and was even hidden inside it. Obali achrei. But there's a blowing or there's some factor. You have these gabras of the eish inside the gacheles. We're not so much concerned how that happened, but it does take place, that the shaleves reveals itself outside the actual body of the gacheles. Hagam, it's come out into a ishpashtas in its own right, as it were, and it's boiled and it's near michutz from the metzias of the gacheles. Mikol mokim oidena keshura hi odvuka im ha'eish shebeteich hagacheles. That is connected essentially and absolutely in a way which is nogea to its very existence. It's kosher with that, and it's dovuk mamish in that eish inside the gacheles. There can't possibly be this flame which is coming out. In other words, it all depends on how is that Eish inside the Gach. If the Eish is present inside the Gachelas, then there'll be this is pashtas. There can be this is pashtas. Oh, but if for some reason, then the whole thing cools down so much that there's no longer any Eish inside the Gachelas, then there won't possibly be any Eish on the outside, which means that the Gachelas is tolui almost in two ways, or two efanim in that Eish B'Teich HaGacheles. First of all, he's tolui in the fact that there is Beklal Ayin in Shaleit. That there can be the yin of an Eish B'Teich HaGacheles. And then it's tolui in the fact that it must be B'Tachlis HaDveikis with that Eish. And if it's not B'Tachlis HaDveikis, if anything would interrupt between its contact with the Eish, you just wouldn't have the Pashta. It just wouldn't be there. And says the Rebbe, that's the essential and atzmistic dependence of the Eish Hamishpashit with the Eish B'Teich HaGacheles, which means that you can't have the whole Metzias. The etzem Metzias of that Eish is really the Eish B'Teich HaGacheles, and there are Chuzim or Dveikim Mamish Pachtas Gemura, one in the other. Okay, my Cain, you and Vesses feels that. Similarly, we'll understand when I get to the Esesphere. Shahem Beprinas Yichud u Dveikes Ba'erein Seifa Hama'atzil. That they are Betachlis HaYichud, like we saw, both Mitzad the Oiris and Mitzad the Keilim. The Betachlis HaDveikes with the Ihu, with the Eberste, how he is the Ma'atzil, he who makes and brings about the Gilead of the Sphire. They've already come, as it were, downwards into Olam HaAtzilus, and they become Aish Pashtas, Kilu, as you might say, almost Michutz, from the Pshitas of the Eretz Seif Mamish, so they become an Olam Bifnei Atzmum, as it were, Ainim Faneros Vekelim in Atzilus, and therefore they're Aish Pashtas for Gilui Mei Eretz Seif HaMatzil, Umiko Mokim Hareim Oiris Atzmiyim Shedvukim Bia Etzem. Now here we meet up with that idea that we differentiated before in the Ha'oras. Here we talk about a Ha'ora Atzmiyas. In other words, that it's only a Ha'ora directly from that Oir Kamosha who ain't safe Ma'atzil, meaning not B'derech Tzimtzum, albeit maybe a certain Tzimtzum, but not Derech Helem or Hester. And therefore it's called Oiris Atzmiyim. They are Megale and Mekusha, and they are Megale their Moker, and therefore they're called Oiris Atzmiyim Shedavukim Beha Etem. Ukemoi Kol Oir Shedovuk Beha Moya Shaloi. Any oil which is Mamish Dovuk in its Ma'or, Shebilti Ma'or. If we were to imagine not having the Ma'or, therefore they can't, just like we saw that if there's no Aish anymore in the Gacheles, then you can't have the Shalhevet. Same here, that only mitzad the etzem being of the Moya, then there's possible to be a Or. And therefore, as is well known, and we've already discussed, the oil is me'ein, even though it's not completely the moya, but it is similar and has in itself essential revelations of the moya, even though it's only a ha'ora mi'a moya. It's not kla'in in a moya. So what is the connection here? Why do we say that? Because there's no metzias of the oil without the moya. And built-in in a moya, you can't imagine the whole metzias of the oil. Then why is it? How does that just fall? V'lochein, and therefore, therefore needs a little bit of view. What is the therefore? The oil is mi'ain hamoya. Was it kila de kesha? So we have to say that ein chanami. Maybe it didn't have to be that way. We could maybe imagine arguing a way that you could have a or without being ma'ain hamoya, but in this particular case, where he says, well, I suppose in a way, let's not go limiting it from other cases. Let's deal with the Etzem case itself. Since the moya is the whole metzias of the Ur. In other words, that the Ur has no metzias without the moya. Because immediately the moya would not be there. There wouldn't be any oya. Or if the oya weren't double, but tachas there wouldn't be any. Which it's like two stadium of the same matbeya. So come to is that the whole metzias of that ha'ora is only the moya. And therefore, since the ha'ora is just its whole metzias is only the moya, and therefore it must some way or another express the moya. And some way or another it must reveal or say something about the moya. Because there's no Indian of Helem or Esther, on the contrary, it's an Indian of Gilui. The ha'ora is a dova hamagala is a moya. One of the inyanim b'zeh is that on the day the Indian of the ha'ora, then we know about the moya. In other words, that if it weren't for the ha'ora, we would have real no appreciation klal of the moya. Yeah, well, that doesn't teach me a great deal about the moya, but it does show me that I can know certain characteristics about the moya from the ha'ora, not beklal the whole atzmius of the moya, and not the whole. In the case of Elakuz, for sure we can't know really anything about etzem atzmusi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu that remains betachlis avdora from the moya, from the ha'ora betachlis. However, there are certain inyanim, but even in Elakuz, the ha'ora is megala. I know the inyan from ain't safe. Lispashtos ha'ora, it can go ain't safe. But other inyanim, the inyan of the ha'ora Elokis is megala about atzmus ain't safe. Therefore, says the Rebbe, that's the connection between the svara of oyer me'ein hamoya and the whole metzias of a ha'ora legabi its moya. And ever since one is completely and utterly, the other, and the whole metzias of the ha'ora is only the moya, and therefore there's a certain telling in the ha'ora about the moya, because its whole metzias is only the moya. Therefore, even though the moya gives it off, even that it as it were has no relationship in a way to the etzem of the moya, we have to say that something from the moya in an essential way is mitgaleh alidei the ha'or. That's the inyan and the shurish hasvara of the ha'or being ma'ein hamoya. So there was the Rebbe based on that. K'moi kain b'chinas oyer ha'atzilas. Hagam shu b'chinas gilui v'spashtes. It's only a gilui. Whatever gilui is only legabi something else. It's already a yitziyah min ha'etzem, and therefore it's only a ispashtes. Mikol mokim b'chinas devekes bo'etzem. It's completely dovuk in the etzem, and even more, we saw that its whole metzias is the etzem, and therefore he says, I'm sorry, where are we? V'harihu me'ein ha'etzem. And therefore it has in itself this inyan that it's got certain essential characteristics in its gilui, which are characteristic of the etzem. Yes, ain't safe. That the inyan of the oyer of Atzilas is also ain't safe, and we saw that that's one of the ikar inyanim here of ain't safe. I'm sorry, of the oyer being ma'ein amoya is in the inyan of the ain't safe. Ain't safe is pashtuson. I'm sorry, begins ain't safe. The ain't safe is pashtuson. It's well known that the esesphiras of Atzilas are ain't safe is pashtuson. They are mispashet ad ein safe. Dahainu b'ha'oiros Atzilas. Especially, he says, particularly in the oiros of Atzilas, or kameshikosu b'mokim acher. V'lo ulazeis mibchinas oyer da'atzilas mamish lo'hoya efshali is savas oilamas bi. In other words, that from Atzilas directly you can't have the Yisavas of Biyah, because Atzilas is ain't safely his pashtusei, and the whole inyan of Bria becomes a becomes a yesh and a matzias, and we saw earlier that every yesh and matzias means Hagabara, as you might call the antithesis of Ein Seif Lispash. And therefore we can't have directly from Atzilus the Yisavas of Biyah, we have to have it go through Malchus. So here we see this fascinating statement that he says that the Inyan of Uyer Hal is not just Ein Seif Lispashtusai, and then he says that's well on, yes, it's feels Ein Seif Lispashtusan. And then he says, but that's in Vahainu in the Oiris of Atzilus Kamish Kosu B'Makim Acher. So we need to understand what do we mean by saying that the Oiris of Atzilus are Ein Seif his Pashtuson, that the Mamish Ein Seif. Atzilus is doch Oiris B'Kelim, and the Oiris are Meir B'Toy Kelim, and the Mislavishin in Kelim. The Kalim have to be mugbal by Israel. The Kalim are easy in Shalak Bola because they're Chesed Rachamim, Chesed Gvura, V'Nochas auch in Yonim, and Chesed is not Gvura, and Gvura is not Rachamim for that matter. And Netzach is not Hoid, and Hoid is not Yasaid, V'Chulu, V'Chulu. They're all different L'chayra in Yonim, which are Meir in the Kalim, and the Ika, the Alter Rebbe Masbin, and Pasha Boy, and the Ika, what he calls the Hagabola, is from the Inyan HaKalim, not from the Oires. But that Gufa needs a beer, that if the Hagabolas in the Kalim, the Oires are not Mugbolim, how are they Mislavish in the Kalim? How do they relate to the Kalim? So what do you mean by saying that the Spheres are Ein Seif Lis Pash? Do so. No doubt the Shiloh was bothering everybody tremendously, and it was an act of Rahmanas. We helped everybody that they shouldn't be disturbed by it. To the attentive reader, immediately pops up that question: what does it mean that ain't safely pashtus? So therefore, we have to say the view is Kodim Kovan Taklolistike Indian, and then a little bit more Brapati, yes. That the Klolis Ha'inian is that the Moya is Pshitus. He has in himself the meaning from Pshitus. Right? We saw that anything which is Pshitus is automatically Ein Seif. Anything which is Pashut, it has no makeup or no constituent aspects to it, that it just, there's nothing to limit it, it's just Ein Seif. So that type of Ein Seif, which is Mamish Mitzad the Peshitas, Begolui Mamish, we can't say that that's there neither in the Oiros or the Kalim and Atzilas. Because if it were Betachlis of Shitas the Oir, it wouldn't be able to be Mislavish in a Kli. Kol Kli Shi'iyeh, it wouldn't be able to be Mislavish. Peshitas, Mamish, can't get together with a Kli, something which is already a form of some specific quality. And therefore we have to say that the type of tzimtzum from the Ma'atzil to the Ne'atzolim is that the Pshitus somehow or another retracts, and what is left is only the Indian for Ein Seif Le'etzemais Pashtus Ba'agilui. This is Mavur, Ayinim Ein Zez Mavur in Ayin Beis at the beginning of the first chelik, at the beginning of the whole Hemshech of Ayin Beis. The Rebbe Masber did this in it, and just very briefly, he's also oisik in that in, and how can it be if slapshus oiris in the kelim in Atzilas? And so he goes over there with the famous, also brought down in Samech Tes. It's also mentioned. I think we might have learned in one of the Maimarim Bekitza that we learned in Samech Tes that the Indian of the kelim in Atzilas are not mamish hagbola. They're not mamish hagbola, but they are what's called koyach hagbola, koyach hagvu. In other words, they're not the Indian from gvu kipshutei, they're what's called koyach hagvu. And where does the gvu kipshutei derive from? The koyach hagvu of the kelim, it goes into a biyah. That the Indian from gvu mamish is only in biyah. Which means that we say that the kelim are be'emes ain't safe lis pashtusa. The kelim ataka ain't safe lis pashtusa. what is the Indian of the Kalim that is different than the oil? The oil is mislavish nonetheless in that kli. So the Indian of the Hagbola in the Esesphiras, in the Kalim, but the Esesphiras is only what you might call in the content of Ainian. In other words, that's chesed and that's not gvura. But it's chesed b'li seif and it's gvura b'li seif. In other words, that azah chesed, which is mamish b'li gvura, that the roim kampi masik azah, and gvura b'li gvura, and al inyanim b'li gvura. I mean, that what Rachamim is b'li gvura is easy to understand because it's kabah and toy, but all the riches Ainian. That the Kalim are only in the Inyan, and that's only what's called a Koyach HaGvul. That's not Mamish Gvul, Bepoel Mamish. What about the Oires? We have to say that the Oires also are not Betachlis Hapshitas, because if they were, they wouldn't be able to be Mamish in the Kalim Cloud, but they still ain't saved, Lish Pashtusan, and they're having in themselves the lack of Pshitas is less, even Mudgash, more than it is in the Kalim. But Eina Chanami, they also have a certain nearness in some way to the Indian of being able to be mislavish in the Kalim, because they're also not Patakas Upper Shitus, even though they don't have the Indian of Mamish in Yonim B'Teichol. And that's what he's made over there in Ayin Beis. That's what he calls the Esesphiras Agenuzes. You probably heard about him. The Esesphiras Agenuzes. That there's hidden 10 spheres, and they reveal themselves in the Oiras of Atzilas. And so they're called Pshitas Legavi the Kalim, but the Kalim are also not Mamish Gevul, they're only Koyach Gevul, but the fact that the Oiras have already got in themselves a certain trace, not of Kalim, of what we call Esesphiras HaGenuzes, that there's a certain Gilui, but there are Rochik Ma'id in the Oiras of what we call Esesphiras. Well, that makes it possible for the Oiras in Atzilas to be Mischaber with the Kalim. But Begorui, they're all Ein Seif. Each one in its own Indian can just go on Kamoishu at Ein Seif Mamish. That means that the Pshitas has been lost, but the Ein Seif is still there. And the Oiras are able to be mislavish in the Kalim. Why, if they're Pshitas, how do they come? They're only Pshitas Legavi the Kalim. Well, they also have in themselves a very high Indian, which is called Esesphiras Sheba Oirois. That's called the Esesphiras Adar Mitzati Esesphiras Agenuzes. And a very, very high of Shotadik level, how is Inak, or even higher. And that comes down through a certain Ishtaushlas, and this is Mofia in the Oiras Adar Atzilas, and that's what the Rebbe means here, that the Esesphiras of Atzilas, are in an even for Ein Seif, Lis Pashtus on, but again, if we come and say to the Kalim, it's only in these Pashtus that they're Ein Seif, but not in the Pshitas or Inen. In the Pshitas or Inen, they're Legavi the Kalim, they're Pshitas, but they're not Mamish. Pshitas. And if you look up that portion in Ayin Beis, then all becomes Mavua Umaturat, but you need to take a bit of brain sharpening medicine or something before you look up that particular passage in Ayin Beis, because it's very complex. Yes, Mike.
When you're saying that a Spashas comes into itself, like only the Gabi the Kalim with these Spashas, does that have the spheres adding Kate?
Spheres are in case is much higher. Spheres are in case is in the Oshel Tnei Tzimtzum Arishon. That's in the Gila after the oil which is mentioned in Eit Chaim on a further shlav down. And then we get Esesphiras Adein Kate. That's before the Ashora B'Koyach and before the Alois Haraltzen. Well, that's Madregas in the fact that they did undergo a certain level, which is called Spheras Adein Kate. Well, that gave the possibility that eventually there could be the Esesphiras Agenuzes, and that gave the possibility that they could be Behelim and take Ha'eres. So, I mean, you're not completely, off the board, it's not in this particular area. There is a certain kesher of Ein Seif, the Spheras Adein Kate. Well, that's a Madrega which was revealed by the Alter Rebbe Bika. It's a very amazing biur in a famous mime of the Alter Rebbe in Tov Samech Tes. But he's much the whole different Spheras Adein Kate.
I don't understand. What's the difference between the Ar that was of Fehu
Oh yeah, and compared to Tikkun, if Tohu was it was Chesed, but it broke the Kalim. So how can we say this is also Ein Sof, but it doesn't break the Kalim?
That's a good question. Yeah. So what is the nafkamina between the two? So the Indian is that we can sort of without getting involved in a long discussion. To take us a little bit off our theme, but suffice it to say we could be masbered in a moral oifen, and then we could be masbered more in a so-called technical oifen. You follow? And the moral oifen is that the difference that the oiras in Toihu, they were interested in Gilui, as you might say, li'atzmo. They were not yet able, or it's hard to say they didn't want. That would be putting it maybe a bit sharp. But they were not able to be masig, what is the kavana, or Elena, what is the ultimate tachlis. You follow? And therefore they revealed their whole tkivas and their whole pshitas, purifier, as you might say, their own gilui. They were not interested in what's going to happen and who's going to be makabel that gilui. They wanted to be megala themselves, but taklis hashleimus shaleim. You follow? That was killer their whole inyan. And the Kalim, they said, Kalim, no, good. If the Kalim will go along with this, good. If they can't take it, their problem. You follow? Come on, but taklis hadakis, halakus, we're not talking. Therefore, it wasn't able to get together, the Oros with the Kalim. That's mamish the problem. Because the Oros were too insistent on their Ein Safekeit and their Pshitaskeit, and therefore the Kalim just couldn't take it, and there was a blow. As you might call an explosion, a blow. However, in the Inif and Atzilas, they don't lose that Pshitas all that much, the Oros. The truth is, they do and they don't. Why do they lose it if we'll say that they lose that Tuikif Pshit, and they are able to relate to the Kalim? Because they already hear what is the Kavana Elyaina. In other words, that they've gone through what's called Chokhmah. The Ikir of the Tzilas is Chokhmah. Do you Atzilas, you Chokhmah, do you Atzilas, you the Pasuk Eliyahu, the whole Oirak, the whole way, and the whole Metzias of Atzilas is through Chokhmah. If I remember, everything in Atzilas is the bittul of Chokhmah. The bittul of Chokhmah is a tremendous bittul, like he says in Tanya, Periklam and Hey, and the Agua, Hu Levade Vein Zulosei, Zehu Madregas a Chokhmah. And yet, nonetheless, Chokhmah is a Tachas of bittul, Koyach Ma. And that's the union of like two almost contrasting inyonim in the earth of Atzilas. Mitzad the union there also, Eino, Father, they said, was it Kalim, was it Sandra Yonim, Eino, Father, because they're nimshach, like he said, Ein oira mislavish bekola atzilas, el alidesha mislavish tchila, besfilas hachochma. Let's bring the altar bedot, and everything goes through the bittul of koyach. It all goes through the inyan, and therefore the oiras are able to hear like two extremities. On the one hand, they hear the inyan of their tatlis agilu and the pshitas. On the other hand, they hear that they've got to go into the Kalim. We have to say that is somehow or another lessened their Tuikif Agilui, but on the other hand, in the depth of it, it's a greater Tuikif, because they're going with the Emerson, with the Tuikif of the Atzmasei Tzach, really. You got the idea? That's the moral aspect. So I think that's maybe enough for the moral. You understand? Anyway, it comes to Islafis that we've now got this amazing combination in Atzilas of the Uyra ain't safe being Mamish ain't safe, and it's the Indian how it is Mitzad the Uyras, which ain't safe, is Pashtusa, and who are Din Indian Akalin, like we just pointed out. I mean, I have to be moiser, otherwise you can learn this and you can sort of, you just look to somebody and say, what the heck you taught you? You've got to get it right in its right proportion. I know, but it is that. Ulazais, Mipinas Uyra, Atzilas Mamish. If we take the Atzilas Mamish, Kemoishahu, Yehoya Efsheli, Sisavas Oila must be, it couldn't have been the Elas Anivroim, Loihoya Efsheli, but Atzilas Mamish. Meaning that ultimately the Yisavas is talking from Atzilas. Everything is from Atzilas, because Atzilas is the Eberstein. It's Elakus. But it can't be Mamish from Atzilas. Meyachashu, Prinas ain't safe, dying, it's mamish ain't safe, it's pashtas, and the nivroim are the Indian of Metzias and Hagabolo, that automatically implies a union of yesh, not the union of ein seif. Ubichtei sheyumshach oiro atzilas bebiyah lahavison ulahachiyson. Yeah, first of all, to bring them about. Why does the Rebbe stress that the union of Atzilus is not only just lahavoison, to bring them into being, but it's also lahachi oison. In other words, lahachi means to give life, to be the oyer pnimi of the zach. And therefore, we have to say that this oyer not only brings about the nivra, but it's also mislavish in him, which means it's become the union for gvul. In the most musik of the concept of gvul is, so how did that happen? If he is a gate door, how can that be if it's coming from a tzila? And therefore we have to say that it has to undergo in shal tzimtzum v'helem of malchus. That's the whole union of what we began by saying, that the holy Sabbath was from malchus. B'biyah lahaveisan and lahachi veisan. So holiday beginners malchus tatzilas. In other words, the attacking comes from Atzilas. Even malchus, after all its salomas and all its inyanim, it gives forth the oil which is so called, like we saw, it's the oil of Atzilas. It comes through the etzem agugelas or whatever we use in the masholim, and it's still the oil of Atzilas, but it's not nikah anymore. Begodui, like we call it sometimes over there in those matters that I mentioned earlier, it's called Oyer Shel Tulda. It's like a born off Oyer. It's like a new birth. Not mamish the original, but it really is the original. That's the whole uftu and the whole wondrous achievement of the union of Malchus. We'll just make a beginning now on this whole union, and we're moving now into a very famous discussion in Chassidus, the difference between Oyer v'Shem v'Malchus. So we're going to see that that's a very big, basic series of concepts which occur in many, many drushim in Chassidus, both in the early Rebbeim and in the Rebbe Rashab and everybody. So it says, "Ha'inenu de'ine yadua de'bchinas Malchus nikro Shem." Malchus is generally speaking called name, or the Avish's name. Melech Shmoy, and for the moment we're bringing a raya from Psukim or from a pasuk that the etzem concept of a melech, Malchus, the etzem idea, the etzem concept of the rule of a Malchus is alidei the inyan of Shem. Akamayshikasu Melech Shmoy Nikro Aleihem. That the Melech is only Shmoy Nikro Aleihem, only his name is called upon all of the subjects in his Medina. In other words, not that he personally sits in everybody's house or pushes everybody around, but he sits in a very elevated place, and only his name is called upon all beings in the kingdom. So what is that? The inyan amalucha, the concept of kingship, urak mashishmoi mispashet ala Medina. His name literally spreads out throughout the whole country, and when people hear the king's name or they see it signed on a proclamation, ukayetzav, they had a cote, they titter with with bittul and with awe of the melech, and that is given over only through Shmoy, only through his name, and that is Shmoy is only Ais Pashtas Bilva. It is a Rach Masha Shmoy Mispashet Ala Madina. The whole inyan Hashem, if we take it more carefully, the whole inyan of Hashem is Rach Lazu also. In other words, that the king doesn't really need a name Liatzmei. He doesn't really need a name Liatzmei. The whole inyan of his name is only that it should be mispashet for azulos. And the truth of the matter is that applies to any individual. You don't really need your name for yourself. I mean, the truth of the matter is that b'pnimius you do. And even if you don't get called a name, you really have a name. But being called your name is an avu on the part of the parents. But let's say a mensch didn't have any name, he was never given any name, he can still be a mensch, we can still imagine him living and so on, because the name is not really noger le'etzem atzmusai. The ike inyan of the name is for the relationship with the world around him, the people should be able to refer to him by his name. And, or he should be able to relate to all the inyanim around him by being called a name. So the same with a king. The whole inyan of his name is only for the zulas, meaning all the other entities or peoples underneath him, which are called the subject. That's why he needs a name. For himself, he doesn't need ki'im ala zulas, shiikra oisoi bishmoi, that the other person, the other being, should be able to call him by his name. So we see then that Malchus and name are connected very closely, and they're connected conceptually. The concept of the way a king relates is connected with the close concept of shame, which is only a ha'ora for the, as it were, the zulas. And therefore the whole Medina is like a whole series of millions or thousands or however many in the Medina of zulasim legavida melech. And therefore he relates to them through that shame, but his very etzem remains mudal mehem. Okay, he says, Uba Malchus, Bechinas Hamalchus, meaning in the concept of Malchus in general, Urakma Bechinas Agilui Elazulos. It's only the inyan of a revelation to the other entity. Hainu in our nimshal, comparing it now, Lamaila, Hainu oilamus bi. It's only the inyan for oilamus bi yetiravasiya, that the whole inyan for shame is only for their sake. In other words, that he relates by way of ispashtus to all the inyan from bria yetiravasiya, not with his etzem at all, only with ispashtus mimeno, which is called shmoi. That's the inyan of Melech Shmoi Niku Aleim in the Nimshal, that the Eibishter only creates and Bamela runs and is manhig the whole inyan of an oilamas bria yetira vasiya only alidei is pastas b'ha'ora mimena bilvad, meaning his shame, and that's connected with the inyan of Malachis. Ve'ishlema b'zeh, so that in order to understand this more, we can suggest that it's well known the hine yadua oyer, the oyer of a shame or malchus in yonam echad. That the three concepts of oyer and shame or malchus have a allied or what they call common factor to them, which makes them all one, what they're all in from ha'ora levad. And yet nonetheless, they're all united in one klolistic similarity or uniting factor, that they're all just a ha-ora. But nonetheless, they're not really the same, and there's very essential differences between them in those three concepts of fear, shame, and malchus, and we will see about that in more and in future and coming, what you might call developing episodes. We'll see more about these three inyanim, and we'll come here against a very challenging biur in three famous concepts of Oyer, Shem, and Malchus. Praise Hashem.
I'm having trouble understanding something. In the beginning of today's class, we said that Malchus is something that's sort of separate from Malchus. Yet, at the same time, we say that Malchus is a thing that connects the spheres of Atzilus, which are completely together with Or Ein Sof, to Bria, to creation. But when we refer to as spheres of Atzilus, Malchus is also on the spheres. We say Tesha spheres, and the Malchus is something.
That's what we pointed out last night. That's what we described last night. That there's what's called Pnimius HaMalchus and Chitzonius HaMalchus. The Pnimius HaMalchus, or what you might call Etzem HaMalchus, well, that is Muvdo Legamri, and that's part of Atzilus. Like the king, for example, his Etzem Metzias is Muvdo Legamri from there. And then there's an aspect of his Metzias, which is Chitzonius HaGuvad, that goes out and is Meir, I'll call it Medina. And even in that Gufa, there are two levels. That is like how that goes out in a general way, and then how it comes down even into more details and deals with all the details. Well, that's only a Shem Vahora Bilvad from the king. You follow? And that's what causes him to be, on the one hand, moved Alagamri, and on the other hand, he's able to relate to them, because there goes off a Ha'ora Bilvad, and that's the inner of Shem.
and and it will be the only sphere of Atzilus that is able to do that. Right?
Yeah, it's the only sphere of Atzilus which is able to do that. Legabe all of the other oilers. To a certain extent, all the spheres do it. That what actually is the gilu of each sphere, klapei the sphere of Shalamatim, is also a malchus. There's a malchus in each sphere, which means that they also withdraw somewhat one from the other in order to be mashpia one to the other. What happens is that each of those malchus and of the other spheres becomes a portion, as it were, of the sphere of malchus. In other words, the malchus is that koyach of Gilui Klapi Mata in the essential sense. The other there, Mashkin, with the others, it's only like a certain factor in their Mitzvah. Well, it depends how you look at it. The Alter Rebbe in Pasha Noach, in Torah, he says that it's a kudu. He says that the Eretz Yisrael or maybe Ak. But we there a kudu. Well, Ak and Akudim have a certain very basic similarity.
How do they have a similarity?
Well, that's according to what's written in the Kisvei Arizah. He brings over the Shem Kisvei Arizah. But the truth of the matter is that on higher levels, Esespheres HaGenuzis, according to the Ayin Vedas, Esespheres HaGenuzis are really in the oil of But they're on a certain level which is negated to the Kal. They're in Skala Alidei the Kal.
Is the memutza being the neshama leguf? How do you say I have no
it's and